Hello everyone, how's everybody doing? I hope you're doing fine. We have a busy day today. We've got as our guest of honor, Bill Nye, the psyops guy. But before we can get to him, we need to look at some of the fan mail that I got. I'm going to answer some of these comments, some of the questions, some of the issues that these people bring up. Okay. And one of the first ones is this one. He says, the electron is a concept. Not the shell of the concept. A serious physics scientist must know that the electron thing is a mathematical abstraction. We've never seen electrons. We've never touched electrons. We never measure electrons. Electrons is what they named the response appearing on instruments. Okay? There is nothing showing its shape, motion, or existence. It's a guess. It ignores the field, the worst guess I've ever seen, because it ignores the field around the point, which is creating the so-called particle. How did you not know this, Bill? Okay, so what do we respond? Well, here's my reply to that. Okay, let's go point by point. Let's see how many errors this person made. Okay, the first one. The electron, I like the fact that he says the electron is a thing, but then he says it's a concept. It's a thing that's a concept. Well, you know, either it has shape or it doesn't have shape. Either God has shape or God does not have shape. And he can't have both. And the same thing for the electron. Either the electron has shape or the electron does not have shape. There's no two ways about it. Every word in the dictionary either falls under one category or the other. There is no third category for the purposes of physics. Either it's an object and it has shape, or it's a concept and it doesn't. Period. We're done. Now we can use these words consistently. And, you know, nothing, which is the main concept, otherwise known as space, otherwise known as vacuum, that's a concept. There is no physical object called space. And as far as seeing electrons, well, we don't see, touch, or measure in science, so it's irrelevant. Okay, we don't use these words like, oh, I've used my senses. No, the only sense is the common sense, which is the least common of all the senses. Okay, yeah, we detect electrons indirectly. Okay, so there's an indirect detection of electrons, and that's fine. We don't have to see or touch them. What we have to figure out is what invisible entity is in there, you know, and with whatever we've got in there, we have to explain Mother Nature's phenomena, you know, what she does. We don't show shape, okay, so showing shape and showing existence, we don't point to those. What we do is define what existence is. And as far as shape, we point to the object. We're done. So we don't show in the sense of proving, which is how he uses it here. He's talking about proving shape. Okay, like saying we've never seen the shape. That's a question of proof, and that's a question of belief. We're not going to see the shape of things which are invisible and intangible, such as electrons, light, gravity, and all those other mediators, magnetism, electricity. So we will not see that. We will not show, you know, like I showed the other day between two plates, a cathode and an anode. You're never going to be able to point your finger and say, oh, look, there are all these electron balls going from one place to the other. No such monster. You have to make an assumption. And he calls that a guess. But no, it's called an assumption, a hypothesis, okay? Is it a guess? Yeah, you can say it's a guess. It doesn't matter. As long as you use this assumption to explain something, then you're okay. You're doing science, okay? So yeah, we do a guess. Now, he says that's the worst guess that he's ever seen. Well, that's his opinion, okay? I kind of agree with him as far as the electron being a little particle, but again, that's my opinion. Okay. Point, we don't use it. Field, we don't use it. These are unscientific terms. You cannot use these two words. Okay. Field is a concept, and point is a concept also. The word point means location. The word field, who knows what that means? We don't know anymore. It used to mean, you know, the lines of force around a magnet, but that's been expanded to electric field and gravitational field. And no, we don't create anything in science. So this thing which he says, field around the point which is creating the particle. Okay, then the particle has to be a real particle. It can't be just a nonsense point particle, a concept. It's got to be a particle. It's got to be a ball or a cube or a triangle. Yeah, it could be a triangle. It could be 2D for all we care. But that's up to the presenter to make his case, right, to defend his proposal. And how did you not know this, Bill? Well, knowledge is not a part of science. And this poor fella is still living in religion. He thinks he's doing science, talks about knowledge. The word knowledge belongs exclusively to religion. Once you know, means you got a religion. Okay? It means you made up your mind. Okay, and that's you, because the other guy has a different knowledge. You know, one guy knows that God exists, the other one knows that God does not exist. So they both know. And they both provide evidence and proof and experiments and whatever. Okay, another comment. Black holes are just nothing but compacted knots of plasma, which could form a disk, swirl, or a spiral where the energy is very dense. It is called a plasmoid. We refer to all the people in the electric universe as plasmoids. We call them plasmoids. Okay. But he says this thing that he's describing there is a plasmoid. Okay, black holes ought to be plasmoid rings, not bottomless pits inspired by Einsteinian physics. Reasonable evidence that black holes are plasmoids include the shape of galaxies, straight-up jets, X-rays and gamma rays emitted, strong magnetic field, filamentous dust of charged ions. Okay, so what do we have to say about this? Let's see if we get it here. This is the issue. Plasma is a concept. There's no physical object called plasma. And that takes a while for someone from the electric universe, especially, you know, to understand. In fact, I don't think anyone from the establishment understands that. Plasma is a concept. There's no physical standalone object, static concept, a static object called plasma. Okay, and I know this offends a lot of people because they say, what do you mean? I was once banned because I said that plasma is not an object. The electric universe, they kicked me out of their site. Okay, here's plasma. Okay, here's a simulation of what the problem is. Here we have a kangaroo on the left-hand side. You can see it's not moving. That's how you present an object in physics. You point to it and name it. Say, kangaroo. Now the ET understands your language. He understands what a kangaroo is because you're pointing to it. And I just have a two-dimensional picture here. He could, you know, you could just as well point to a 3D or a real live kangaroo and say, that's a kangaroo. Now what's on the right-hand side is a jumping kangaroo. And a jumping kangaroo is a concept. It's not an object. Okay? The object is the kangaroo. What he's doing is a concept called jumping. Okay, so we have jumping kangaroo is not a physical standalone static object. Okay, and I can't put that kangaroo in the middle of space, it being the only object in the universe, point to it and say that's a kangaroo, because that kangaroo is not standing still. What we're watching is a movie. And a movie, any object that is in motion, is a concept. It's a dynamic concept. A running boy, a flying eagle, a swimming bird, swimming fish, all those are concepts. There's no physical object called swimming bird, or, I said bird again, swimming fish or flying bird, okay? No physical standalone object. It's got to be the only object in our universe. It's got to be standalone. It's got to have a backdrop of space, which provides the contour, and you point to it and name it. That's the only way to present an object in physics, and plasma does not qualify under those criteria. Okay. And here we see again what the difference is in regards to plasma. The quantum atom is what, at least the one we have from the days of Niels Bohr and Ernst Rutherford, is that thing that you see there. It's a proton, and next to it you see an electron. That's the static notion of what quantum mechanics says is an atom, a hydrogen atom. So that's the way you would point to it and say this is an atom, which is two objects. Again, we got a problem with that, but that's aside. Here on the right hand side you see the jumping kangaroo, which is what we see in the plasma. Plasma is ionized gas. You have to ionize. You got to do something to the atoms in order to create plasma. So plasma is not a standalone object. It has to be ionized. Okay, the atom has to lose its electron according to quantum mechanics. We have a different interpretation of what ionization is under the rope model. But essentially there you see why plasma is not a physical object. You can't point to plasma because you're not pointing to a single frame in the movie. You're pointing to a movie. And a movie you can't point to. You got to scan your finger. And we don't want you scanning your finger. You got to point and keep that finger steady. And you can't do that with plasma because it's moving all around. And people don't understand that. And that's why we need to define what an object is for the purposes of physics so that people do not confuse movies with pictures. They're confusing film strips with standalone objects. And they introduced them as, one famous one is field, okay, energy, another one. They introduce these words and they say, oh, energy. And the energy does this, it converts to mass. The issue here is there is no physical object, standalone object, non-moving object called energy that you can point to. There is no physical object called time, there is no physical object called mass, and there is no physical object called field. You cannot use those concepts, those dynamic concepts, in lieu of or as physical objects in physics. And that's 99% of what the problem is with mathematical physics. They're using all these dynamic concepts, and they're treating them as physical objects. And the people like the Electric Universe, the Flat Earthers, the people at the John Chappell, or Chapel as I call them, Society, all these people do the same thing. They're moving concepts around. They don't even realize it. They say, well, you got to explain it with concepts. No. We don't explain it with concepts. We got to show a movie, and there better be objects on the screen. I better see shapes. Then I can understand the mechanism, which is what we're trying to find out. We're trying to figure out how Mother Nature does her daily work. It's got to be done with objects. If you don't put an object there during gravity, if you don't put an object there during ionization, plasma, or whatever, what you're doing is, in effect, introducing spirits in that same space. Okay. So here's our atom, just in case. Okay. You see the bottom left there. There's the atom, and upper in the middle there, you see how it's constructed. Okay. So that's our atom. So we do point to our atom, and you can see the electron shell, which is that red line, curved line going around. That is a physical object. Here is it's in 2D. We have a 3D model as well. Again, you can think of it as a ball of yarn. Okay, so here, in fact, looks more or less like this. Okay, ball of yarn. That's what it is. That's how you would see an electron. And a ball of yarn is a physical object. Yes, it's got shape. I know this is news to some people, but that's how simple it is. Physical object you can point to if it has shape. And we point to an electron shell, which is more like, again, like the surface. This is the way I visualize it, as the surface of a ball of yarn, because you got to think of all these, what we call magnetic threads, just constructing from every atom in the universe, right? Constructing the electron shell all around, okay? So that's our model of the atom. On the other hand, this atom that let's see if we can put this back up here. This atom that quantum has on the left-hand side you can't even explain why the electron is faithful to the proton. Why doesn't the electron spontaneously fly away? And yeah, they always show it going around. They show, when they show a static image of the atom, they show this ring. And this ring represents the orbital. What is an orbital? It's the orbit of the electron bead around the proton, right? And they say, well, that's the orbital. They turn the orbit, an itinerary, into an orbital. And then they made a 3D saying, well, the electron goes in all these directions, so it's going around in every direction, forming this ball, okay? And so the question is that a movie or is that a photograph? And obviously that's a movie, what they're pointing to. And so the quantum atom is a movie. That's why they don't understand. That's why they can't point to it. That's why they say, well, you got to go to college to get a master's degree to understand what an electron is. Well, I don't need to go to college to know what a dog is or a tree or a rock. I just point to it. Please point to the electron. To the electron orbital or whatever they're going to point to. Well, they point to a bead. They show it going around describing or constructing a shell, which they call the orbital, okay, the orbital, and then they say that's the atom. Now that's a movie of an electron moving around a proton. That's not an atom, and that's the problem. Anyone who wants to talk about physics and they're going to use the atom, well, they have to start by drawing their atom. Okay, got another comment here. Is this the one? Yeah. And this fellow accuses me. He says, I don't like Tyson, but I don't support attacking someone for his beliefs. Oh my God. Okay, here's my answer to this. Here we have, oh no, wrong guy. I'll get him in a minute here. Got the wrong one. Here we have Mr. John Baez. I presented him in the past. And he created the crackpot index, which is lodged at the University of California at Riverside, which is a state-funded institution. And in it, he's got the crackpot index with which he belittles anyone who, he says 10 points for each claim that quantum mechanics is fundamentally misguided. He says exactly the same thing about general relativity. And then he says 10 points for arguing that while the current well-established theory predicts phenomena correctly, it doesn't explain why they occur or fails to provide a mechanism. Well, that's interesting because that's exactly what we do here. So Mr. Baez disagrees with our way of doing science. He believes that you're not supposed to answer why questions. By why, I don't mean purpose. I mean causes, mechanisms. He's saying that science doesn't do that, physics doesn't do that because he's a mathematical physicist. And he says that you can't challenge quantum or relativity because if you say that it's fundamentally misguided, well then you're a crackpot, you're a crank. And so these people belittle and they use the crackpot index against anyone who disagrees with them. But this fellow wants me to not badmouth the celebrities. It turns out these celebrities are all in the same boat. They all essentially vouch for general relativity and quantum mechanics, string theory as well, right? And if you attack any of those, you're a crank. You're automatically a crank. You're not allowed to publish. They censor you. They belittle you. They make fun of you. They ridicule you, your theories. That's okay. But I can't go in there and criticize these guys and treat them with the respect that they deserve. Well, I think we don't have a level playing field. That's what I think, okay? And so, I can sleep well at nights, believe me. I don't care about these guys because what they do is they propagate ignorance. And that's how I see them, okay? Okay, oh, by the way, here we had John Rennie, another fella, okay, from the same guild, Okay, mathematical physics. He runs the Stack Exchange. He's got all these medals on his chest. Editor-in-chief of Scientific American, Public Library of Science, la la la. Deputy editor of Quantum Magazine. In other words, he's a censor. Okay, that's what he does. He censors. That's his job. And he also ridicules people. He says the first job of any scientific fraud is to persuade the public that science is itself unscientific, which is exactly what I say. The science we have today is unscientific. Why? Because it does not explain causes and mechanisms, which is what Bias objected to, first of all. And second, because all their physical interpretations of people like John Rennie and John Bias and all these other bozos like Brian Greene and Michio Kaku and Tyson and the guy we're going to deal with today, Bill Nye, all these people do the same thing. They have irrational explanations, irrational physical interpretations, which they sell to the public as done deals, as proven truth. And you're not allowed to criticize that because these people control who publishes and who doesn't. That's so for those people who accuse me of being naughty with all these celebrities, well, all I can tell them is, go find yourself, do some research and find out for yourself. You know, if you can publish something against general relativity, quantum mechanics, or string theory, I challenge you. And before you accuse me, go to the Riverside, University of Riverside, and tell the president of that college why he can't get that crackpot index out of there. I mean, it's used to belittle anyone who opposes quantum and general relativity. You would think that's a misuse of state funds. So start there. Don't start with me, okay? If you got a problem with the way I treat these celebrities, okay? And it just means that this fellow is not in touch with what's going on in the scientific world. He just blobs, says, oh yeah, you're mistreating all these great celebrities. You know, I mean, who cares about them? They're making a lot of money selling garbage to the public. I think the way I look at it, they commit crime against humanity for what they're doing. I would put them in prison. That's what I would do. So I'm being too nice to them. Okay, fellow that we're going to deal with today, this fellow, I used to watch him when I was a kid in the 60s, and he comes way before me. He comes from the 50s. There was a program when I was a kid called Watch Mr. Wizard, okay? And I saw him in the 60s. Again, he was there already since the 50s. And he would do some little magic tricks with science there, you know, some science experiments, some flashy experiments. And I used to watch him several times. I mean, I was not a follower by no means, but I watched many of his programs, said, oh, okay, that's interesting, look at that. And that was it. I never went beyond that. Of course, now when I look back, you know, and do a little bit of revisionism, review, I find that Mr. Wizard, name is Don Herbert, okay? And Don Herbert, Mr. Wizard, he never explained anything. He was like good old Mary Poppins the other day. Let me put her up here again. See if we can, give me a second here.
Will you be good enough to explain all this?
First of all, I would like to make one thing quite clear.
Yes?
I never explain anything.
At this point, I had to interrupt what I had this segment because what happened was I had Mary Poppins talking in the background. I didn't realize that until too late. And so there was several minutes of her speaking in the background. I had to remove that whole segment. Essentially, I'm going to just give an introduction here to Bill Nye, okay, and then continue with the good part that came after that. What I'm going to be eliminating almost entirely is Ron Herbert. He was the guy who Bill Nye took after. In other words, Bill Nye essentially imitated the program run by by this fellow. During many years, he ran a program called Watch Mr. Wizard, which I watched when I was a kid. But unfortunately, I got Mary Poppins. I couldn't get her out. Well, I wasn't aware that she was speaking in the background. I'm kind of new at these MP4s, and this is these things that you learn the hard way, I guess. Okay, anyways, here's Bill Nye, what I was saying. Okay, just let me give you a quick presentation for him, and that's that he's a mechanical engineer, television presenter, and essentially a science communicator. What is a science communicator? Science communicator is a person who popularizes science. And the question is whether this fellow is a scientist. Is that what he does, a science communicator? Or is he doing something else? And he's a host of a science show. He calls it a science show. It's known as a science show. The title says it all, The Science Guy, Bill Nye the Science Guy. And the other one is later, this past tense, he did that in the 90s. Then he hosted a program in Netflix, I think for a couple years, and that's Bill Nye Saves the World. Okay, I like to think of him more like this, as a clown. And the reason for that is that he does a lot of horsing around. I have no problem with clowning around, by the way, again. My objection is that they present this as science, in the guise of science. That's where I have a problem with that. If they want to do entertainment, I have no problem with that, but don't call it science. And that's where I have problems with all these folks, okay? Okay, so here, let me continue with a good segment. The one that was not dubbed by Mary Poppins. He started doing The Science Guy, and then he moved on to bigger and better things, Bill Nye did. And so one of the things we have to look at is what the career path of all these so-called celebrities was, okay, and is to this day, okay? So here, let me get you another one of these. And this is from Bill Nye again. This is, if I can get him to, give me a second here. Takes a second to get these things rolling. Sometimes they're very hard to manage when one person does it alone, okay? Okay, here he goes, and he blows hot air. This is what he does these days, or did lightly, does a little bit of alchemy, okay? Greases hands, okay? And feet as well. I guess they all have to be greased. He laughs a lot about it, you know, laughs all the way to the bank, okay? So, yeah, this is what these people do. They do this for a living, okay? And they think they're doing science, and all they're doing is just making money. They're making programs, the documentaries, and all these people call them up to serve on their programs. Why? Because they're popular. They're faces that people recognize, and people really watch these people, follow these people, only because of the entertainment. There is no science there, other than the description, other than wowing the crowds, like, wow, oh man, that's awesome. That's it. There's never an explanation following that. And, you know, he's this Bill Nye is in the same tradition. Okay, here's what Bill Nye does these days. Let's see if we can get him up here. What he tackles sex, global warming, GMOs, technology, alternative medicine. This is what he's into. This is what he's moved on to. Again, he's a mechanical engineer, okay? So this is what the topics that he raised, at least in his last program. I think it ran all the way to 2018. Probably was going to be renewed, I don't know. And so this is what they do. What does this have to do with physics or even with mechanical engineering, which is apparently what he studied? And it's got very little, in fact. It's got a lot to do with what people are into these days, which is food, health, you know, whether we should have sex with the same sex, technology, like we're going out into space. You know, a lot of this stuff has nothing to do with science, with explaining a mechanism. And so again, there's a lot of confusion between what technology is and what science is, okay? And here's, and give me a second here to get these things rolling, okay? One of the things he does these days, he sells diversity, okay? And here you can see what he's talking about, okay? You would think that he's just selling, diversity. That's all he's doing. He's selling homosexuality. He's saying it's okay. Why? Because this is what people are saying out there. He knows, in other words, they do market studies and they say, okay, this is what people think out there. At least 50% of the people, they're okay with all this. And so this is what he sells. He says, look, it's scientifically correct. There's no problem with this. Aside from the fact that that's his personal opinion, what does it have to do with science? These are opinions. Some people have no problem with homosexual sex. Other people do. So are you going to say that the people who have a problem with it are unscientific? Is that what we're saying here? So we've got a problem because they're introducing political things in the guise of science. And I have a little bit of problem with that, okay? And again, it has nothing to do with my personal opinion on these issues. It has to do with the fact that they're introducing these subjects as scientific first, and second, they're just giving you their opinion to shove down your throat their religion. That's all they're doing. They're giving you their opinion, saying, oh, it's scientific. Mine is a scientific opinion. That's what Bill Nye is saying. Okay. Here's another one that he deals with. Okay. And let's see if I can get it rolling here. Got to be careful the sound doesn't stay. Okay, so here it goes. And this one has to do with climate change.
We hear it so much that it feels like a buzzword, but it is far from it. Climate change is a real and serious issue. We hear it so much that it feels like a buzzword, but it is far from it. Climate change is a real and serious issue.
Is that science? Bill Nye is saying that climate change and that we should do this and should do that. I mean, the shoulds are all opinions, politics, religion. That's got nothing to do with science. In science, we want to have objective mechanisms. Just tell me how something works, and then we're done with science. But these people are using the word science in all their programs, right? They overuse that. And what are they saying? They're saying, oh, climate change, it's happening. We got to do something about it. And if you don't agree with them, you're unscientific. That's where I have a problem. I have no problem with someone saying or arguing, look, I think climate change is occurring. I think it's bad. Okay, that's their argument. No problem there. That's different than saying my argument is scientific, yours is not, Bill, because you may not agree with me. That's a totally different thing. And presenting it in the guise of science, it just adds, to the problem. Adds insult to injury. Okay, this is where I see the danger of all these people, all these celebrities. They're putting their face behind their opinions, and people just believe the opinion because they think, oh, it's scientific because Bill Nye said it. Okay, and let's see here we have another one. And this one has to do with the modified. Genetically modified foods.
The good side is we get more
organisms.
Yield per hectare or acre.
Okay, one.
So in other words, we have less impactful farming. In other words, we affect the ecosystem less because we'll produce more food on less land. That's the upside of genetically modified.
That's 1/4.
We're using biology to fight pests and diseases rather than chemistry. The unintended consequence, the classic one, is one that everybody has observed, is the monarch butterflies, where we have reduced their population 90%, not as a consequence exactly of raising genetically modified food, but by using this extraordinarily effective herbicide that has killed the milk flowers or milkweeds, which...
Okay, now, does that have anything to do with science? Talking about technology, genetically modified organisms or foods. Is this science? Is this what we call science? Or is this technology? Is science the same thing as technology? So this is another issue, because people say, oh, science. And they always say science and technology, meaning these two words are not synonyms, but people don't realize that, because every time they introduce technology, they say, oh, it's science. The scientist just told us. No, that's not science. Technology is not science. Developing gadgets, or in this case, genetically modified foods or whatever, that's not science. And instead, it'd be nice if you use that time to explain things. Like, for example, what I showed, I think a couple weeks ago, which is this. Here we're having fruits and veggies come out with Siamese twins. And I have an explanation for this. I'm saying this has to do with the fact that we've been artificially growing these things, doing artificial selection for many, many years. And as a result, today, all these fruits and veggies, a lot of them are losing their genetic diversity. And after a while, they start having big problems. These are genetic problems. And people say, they just say, how interesting. Well, this is what it would be nice if Bill Nye would explain. Look, we have these Siamese twins, watermelons and tomatoes and potatoes and whatever. Can you explain why we have a problem? No, they just said, genetically modified foods. It's good and it's bad. We have two opinions on that, right? Both sides, just in case, to cover all the bases. Okay, here's another one. And again, let me turn this one on.
Welcome to the show. I'm Bill Nye, and I'm here to save the world. It's an alternative medical treatment, meaning it's an alternative to actual medicine. I don't make the rules, people. This is science.
So, was that science? Or was he just giving his opinion? See, again, we have all these issues that people like him, celebrities, are putting their face behind, just saying, I'm a scientist, and if you don't agree with me, right, with my opinion, you're unscientific, because I represent the scientific establishment, and we have proven this. That's the message that gets across. And so a lot of people form their opinions based on this, and of course they have these political opinions as a result as well, right? So keep that in mind. And here, let me give you the last one. See if it works. Oh, it's the same one. Sorry. I had that one as a backup in case the sound didn't work. Okay, anyways, so what is the homework? What is the summary from all this debate about Bill Nye? Well, this is what I have. I have a few questions that you can take as homework, and please feel free to answer them. I'll address good questions or good answers that people give. Okay, and here is homework questions to work on. Is what Bill Nye does science? Is that what we call science? What is your definition of science? And if so, does Bill Nye, what he does, fit the bill? Is he a science communicator? Is he a popularizer of science or of his opinions of fads? Right now we have a lot of fads, diversity. We have Black Lives Matter. I'm sure he's going to talk a little bit about that as well. White Lives Matter as well. They created all these movements out there. Is he a science communicator, or is he just giving his opinions? Political, religious, whatever. Is he just being is he just being a politically correct salesman? Is he just a salesman, a preacher? He's trying to be politically correct because all these fads are very popular these days, and so, health foods, doing exercise, a lot of people are into all that stuff. And so that's what he talks about, because they do market studies and say, well, this is what people want to hear. And he said, here we have a science guy, and he's going to tell you about all these things, about genetically modified foods, about doing exercise, about diversity, and you should have sex with anyone you want because it's okay, and science says so. And so is this science, or is he just selling you his opinions, his political opinions? And then the question is, the big one there is technology the same thing as science? Is there a difference between science and technology, or are they the same thing? Are they synonyms? Why do we have two words if they're synonyms? And if they're not, what is your definition of technology? What is your definition of science? Is what Bill Nye does science? Is he the science guy or the tech guy? Okay, I call him the psyops guy, not the science guy, because I think he does more recruiting for the official versions than real science. And does he just regurgitate quantum mechanics and general relativity catechism? Not directly, because he doesn't talk specifically about those subjects all the time, or rarely, in fact. But they're in the background. He brings them up like casually and says, well, like QM just proved that. General relativity proved that, So if he's going to talk about space, about going into space and so on, he's going to bring general relativity and therefore reinforce the official catechism. And so this is the issue. The issue is that whether this guy is doing science. And so, yeah, please let me know. Put some good comments on that, and we'll find out what you have to say about it. I don't think he's a scientist. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.